Ethan, I hate to be the one to tell you this, but I think I saw Lauren at the gala last night. And she wasn't just attending as a guest. She was working it. As an escort. An icy chill slivered down my spine. Lauren. My Lauren. My wife, the mother of my child, secretly moonlighting as a high-class call girl. It couldn't be. There had to be some mistake. Jack, are you absolutely sure it was her? I asked, my voice strangled. Maybe it was just someone who looked similar. I'm certain, Ethan, Jack replied solemnly. I got a good long look at her. Tall, honey blonde hair, green eyes. That birthmark on her left shoulder. It was Lauren, no doubt about it. I'm so sorry, man. My head swam as I ended the call, casting my phone aside with numb fingers. Lauren had said she was at a work conference last night. An overnight trip for her admin job at a local nonprofit. But according to Jack, she had been dressed to the nines in a slinky red number, dripping in diamonds I knew we couldn't afford, batting her lashes at the city's wealthiest and most powerful men at the mayor's annual charity gala. And apparently she hadn't just been a guest, but entertainment for hire. The thought made bile rise in my throat. How could this be? The woman I'd pledged my life to, the woman I trusted implicitly, living a double life. Peddling her body in our marriage vows for what? Some extra cash. The thrill of leading a secret life. I felt like I didn't know her at all. I glanced at the framed picture on my desk of Lauren and I on our wedding day, blissful smiles lighting both our faces. Next to it sat a snapshot of her holding our daughter Lily as a baby, love and devotion radiating from her. Both photos mocked me now, taunting me with their false promises of loyalty and commitment. Lily. Oh God. If the woman I thought I knew had the capacity for this level of deceit, was anything about our life together real? A horrifying thought crept through me, with Lauren's apparent extracurricular activities, could I even be sure Lily was mine? The little girl I'd loved and raised for 3 years, was she even my flesh and blood? The uncertainty lacerated my heart. I knew I couldn't just sit here marinating in anger and confusion. I needed to get to the bottom of this. To find out just how deep my wife's lies ran. With shaking hands, I Googled private investigators in our area. If Lauren wouldn't give me the truth, I'd find someone who could uncover it for me, no matter how painful it might be. Our marriage, our family, depended on it. After scrolling through different sites and reviews, I settled on an agency that looked reputable yet discreet. Jotting down the number, I punched it in with trembling fingers. Weston Investigations, how may I help you? A gruff male voice answered on the second ring. This is Ethan Summers, I said, steadying myself with a breath. I need your help. I think my wife might be hiding something from me. Something big. There was a brief pause. I see, the man replied, his tone shifting to a mix of businesslike and sympathetic. I'm Jack Weston, lead detective. Why don't you tell me what's going on? Haltingly at first, then spilling out in a torrent, I told him everything, Lauren's supposed conference, Jack's bombshell accusation, my growing concerns about Lily's paternity, the sickening feeling that my entire life might be built on falsehoods. If I couldn't even trust my wife, could I trust my own judgment about anything? Mr. Summers, I'm very sorry for your situation, Detective Weston said once my agonized account trickled to a stop. I know this must be incredibly difficult. Rest assured, I will handle your case with the utmost discretion. My team and I will dig into your wife's movements, get to the bottom of what she's been up to and whether those extracurricular activities go beyond this one incident. We'll uncover the truth, whatever it may be. You have my word. Thank you, I croaked out. I set up an in-person appointment with Weston for the next day, then hung up, head pounding. I had to hold it together. I couldn't let Lauren see that anything was amiss, not until I had all the facts. Thank God she was still at work and Lily was with my parents for the weekend. I didn't know if I could face either of them right now without my agony and doubts etched all over my face. Surging to my feet, I paced my office as erratic as my heartbeat. The woman in those photos still smiled at me, unchanged, but I could no longer recognize her. It was as if some twisted funhouse mirror had warped her into someone unrecognizable. Someone capable of betrayal beyond my comprehension. Who was this person I called my wife? What other secrets was she hiding behind those sparkling emerald eyes and sweet smile? Jack's words from that fateful call continued slicing me to ribbons. She was working it. As an escort. Each time they repeated in my mind, they ripped a new, jagged hole in the tattered remains of my trust. I forced air into my lungs, trying in vain to quell their constriction. One way or another, I promised myself, I would drag the truth out into the light, no matter how hideous it may be. I had to know how deep this deception ran. How long I'd been played for a fool by the woman who vowed to love me for better or worse. But a treacherous voice in my head whispered that once I opened this Pandora's box, there would be no closing it again. No unseeing whatever I discovered. No going back to the man I was before one dubious phone call blew my world off its axis. Steeling my resolve, I shook off the insidious doubts. However excruciating the truth turned out to be, living a lie would be infinitely worse. It was time to blow Lauren's house of cards down and finally face the woman behind the mask I'd clearly never managed to fully penetrate. Even if shattering her illusions destroyed me in the process. Returning to my desk, I slumped back in my chair, burying my head in my hands. My eyes stung, my throat ached, my entire being felt scoured raw. But I knew this was just the beginning. That Detective Weston was my only hope of uncovering the truth before the fallout incinerated what little stability I had left. Glancing up, my gaze snagged once more on our wedding portrait. Lauren's jubilant face beaming back at me, veil fluttering in the breeze. So hopeful. So heart-rendingly false. I realized now our entire foundation had been built on quicksand, destined to give way and suck me under. As I watched fat drops of rain race down the window pane, rivulets crisscrossing and blurring my reflection, one thought crystallized in my mind: diamond hard, whatever Detective Weston unearthed, I had to stay strong for Lily. She needed her father now more than ever, even if that took every ounce of fortitude I could muster. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, an ominous portent of the storm brewing within my shattered heart. But I vowed I would weather Lauren's betrayals. That I would emerge from this crucible stronger for our daughter. No matter how many pieces of me I had to gather up afterwards. Straightening my shoulders, I forced myself to breathe. First things first, I had to make it through the rest of this day. Put on a mask of my own until I could unleash the brewing anguish alone. 1 hour at a time, I told myself. You can do this. You have to. Slowly, robotically, I turned back to my computer. But even as I stared at the screen, the words blurred into meaningless squiggles as Lauren's specter loomed before me, secrets spilling from her like poison. I knew one thing with absolute certainty: no matter how this ended, I would never be the same. Lauren had made sure of that. The night passed in a restless daze, Lauren's face haunting my fitful dreams. By the time morning broke, I was no more settled than when I'd first collapsed into bed. At least the weekend meant a brief reprieve from having to paste on a facade of normalcy for my colleagues. Mechanically going through my morning ablutions, I tried not to let my gaze linger on Lauren's toiletries scattered across our bathroom counter. Each familiar item felt like a mocking reminder that I no longer knew the woman who used them. How long had a stranger been sleeping beside me? Giving myself a mental shake, I finished getting ready and headed out to my meeting with Detective Weston. The drive passed in a blur, my mind too consumed with alternating waves of anger and despair to focus on the road. I arrived at the nondescript office building with little memory of the journey. Weston greeted me with a firm handshake and a look of practiced compassion. Ushering me into his office, he gestured for me to take a seat opposite his desk. "Thank you for coming in, Mr. Summers," he began, folding his hands in front of him. "I know this is a difficult time. But I want to assure you that my team and I will handle your case with the utmost discretion and professionalism. Our goal is to get you the answers you need, no matter what they may be." I nodded tightly, not trusting my voice. Weston seemed to understand, his eyes softening a fraction. "To start, it would help if you could provide any additional details about your wife's routine, her work schedule, her usual haunts. Anything that might give us a clearer picture of her day-to-day life and where she might be spending her time." Clearing the lump in my throat, I began to outline what I knew, or thought I knew, about Lauren's habits. Her admin job at the nonprofit downtown. Her weekly yoga classes on Tuesday evenings. Occasional girls' nights out with friends I'd met a handful of times. With each detail I recited, I felt the scope of my ignorance yawning wider. I'd never had reason to distrust her before. Now, every gap in my knowledge gaped like an open wound. Weston took meticulous notes as I talked, his pen scratching across the legal pad. When I finally ran out of steam, he sat back, tapping his pen against his chin. Okay, this is a good start, he assessed. Hey Race, what well do? I'll assign a couple members of my team to surveil your wife discreetly. Follow her movements, get a sense of her schedule and any deviations from it. I'll also have someone dig into her digital footprint, see if there's anything unusual lurking there. We'll compile our findings and regroup in a week to see what we've got. If she's hiding something, we'll find it, Mr. Summers. He must have seen the tortured look on my face, because his angular features softened once more. Listen, I've been doing this a long time. Seen a lot of shit. But I've also seen a lot of people find the strength to get through it and come out the other side. Whatever we uncover, you'll get through this too. Just take it one day at a time. I left Weston's office feeling marginally lighter, if no less raw. Having a plan of attack, some forward momentum, loosened the crushing weight on my chest just a fraction. But as I drove home, knowing that strangers would soon be peering into the darkest corners of my wife's life, and by extension, my own, a leaden unease crept back in. Pushing it aside, I resolved to focus on Lily. She was due back from my parents' place this afternoon, and I needed to shore up my Dad of the Year facade. I couldn't let on that anything was amiss. Not when I didn't even know how deep Lauren's betrayal ran yet. The moment I walked through the door and Lily barreled into my arms, shrieking Daddy. With abandon, the rest of the world fell away. I closed my eyes and breathed in her familiar, innocent scent. Let the love wash over me, soothing my ragged edges. Sweet, trusting Lily. My heart. My world. I would claw my way back to being the best father I could for her, no matter what it took. Holding her closer, I let her youthful exuberance buoy me for a few stolen moments. After settling Lily back in at home, I distracted myself by spending the day planning fun father-daughter activities for the week ahead, our usual post-visit tradition. But even as I focused on strategizing the perfect cookie-baking session or trip to the science center, Lauren's imminent return simmered in the back of my mind, dread a heavy pit in my stomach. How was I going to face her, knowing what I now suspected, and had hired professionals to confirm? The unmistakable sound of Lauren's key in the lock jolted me out of my brooding. Inhaling deeply, I pasted on what I hoped was a neutral expression. Game face on. For Lily. Ethan. Lily. I'm home, Lauren called out as the door clicked shut behind her. The familiar cadence of her voice, one that used to fill me with comfort and love, now sounded foreign. Like it belonged to a stranger. How could this woman who'd once felt like an extension of myself now seem so alien? Lily took off like a shot towards the front entrance, squealing mommy. I followed more slowly, hands shoved in my pockets to hide their trembling. Rounding the corner, I saw Lauren crouched in the front hall, arms full of our effusive little girl. Her face was alight with an adoring smile as she cuddled Lily close, peppering kisses on her plump cheeks. The perfect picture of a devoted mother. If I didn't know better, I'd never believed this same woman was capable of secrecy and betrayal. But now that the seed of doubt had been planted, I couldn't help but wonder if those luminous smiles had ulterior motives. Straightening up with Lily still koala-ed to her hip, Lauren turned that megawatt grin on me. There are my two favorite people. How was your weekend, babe? Mentally stomping down the knee-jerk urge to flinch at the endearment, I schooled my voice into a facsimile of normality. Oh, you know. Pretty low-key. Just held down the fort, got some stuff done around the house. I shrugged casually, though my heart was pounding behind my ribs. Keep it together, Ethan. Don't let on. She peered at me, a tiny furrow appearing between her brows. Everything okay? You look a little stressed. I forced out a chuckle that sounded brittle even to my own ears. No, I'm good. Just tired. Work has been a lot lately. Lauren made a sympathetic noise, bouncing Lily gently. I'm sorry, hon. Anything I can do? Maybe I can take little miss here off your hands for a bit so you can decompress. The genuine concern in her eyes was almost enough to make me doubt everything Jack had told me. Almost. Maybe it was all some huge misunderstanding. An uncanny doppelganger. A case of mistaken identity. But Jack had sounded so certain. Shaking off the wheedling inner voice, I smiled tightly. Nah, I'm fine. Nothing some quality time with my girls won't fix. Lauren returned my smile, though something uncertain lingered in her eyes. For a terrifying second, I thought I saw a glimpse of guilt. But before I could decide if I'd imagined it, it was gone, replaced by her typical sunny demeanor. Sounds perfect. I'll get dinner started while you two catch up. She kissed Lily's forehead, then leaned in to peck my cheek. I turned my face at the last second, her lips grazing the corner of my mouth instead. If she noticed the subtle rejection, she didn't comment on it. I watched her sashay towards the kitchen, Lily babbling happily in her ear. To the untrained eye, we probably looked like any other idealistic young family. But I could feel the fissures beginning to spiderweb beneath our glossy surface. The secrets and lies creating an invisible chasm between the woman I loved and the stranger wearing her face. Breathing slowly through my nose, I pushed down the queasy rage simmering in my gut. I couldn't afford to lose it now. Not when I still didn't have confirmation one way or the other. I needed hard evidence of Lauren's infidelity before I could blow our lives apart. For Lily's sake, if not my own. Shoulders squared, I made my way into the kitchen to join my family for another dinner filled with stilted smiles and coded silences. It was going to be a long week. But hopefully by the end of it, I'd have the truth, no matter how ugly it turned out to be. For all our sakes. The week crawled by in an agonizing haze of forced normalcy and simmering paranoia. I went through the motions at work, half my brain always preoccupied with what Weston's team might be uncovering. Every time Lauren's name lit up my phone, I had to steel myself before answering, terrified my voice would betray the suspicions slowly devouring me from the inside out. At home, the atmosphere was little better. I watched Lauren like a hawk for any signs, any tiny ticks that might confirm her illicit activities. But she remained as placidly inscrutable as ever, smoothly juggling motherhood and work with the blithe finesse I'd always admired. The ease of it made me want to scream. I tried to lose myself in time with Lily, letting her innocent antics and artless affection act as a balm to my flayed nerves. But even our customary daddy-daughter dates were tainted now, the what-ifs and worst-case scenarios constantly lurking at the edges of my mind. What if Lauren had been stepping out on us during these sacred outings? What if Lily wasn't even mine to claim? The poisonous speculations choked me every time I looked at my little girl's trusting face. Finally, after 7 excruciating days that felt more like 70, it was time to meet with Weston again and learn my fate. I'd taken the day off work, too restless to sit behind a desk and pretend to focus. As I made my way into the detective's cramped office, the apprehension sat like lead in my gut, cold sweat prickling my neck. Weston greeted me with a solemn nod, no trace of his earlier sympathy in the grim set of his jaw. He waited until I'd settled uneasily into the chair across from him to drop his bombshell. Mr. Summers, he began without preamble. I'll give it to you straight. It's not good news. He slid a thick manila folder across the scarred desktop towards me. My team has found compelling evidence that your wife has been engaging in extracurricular activities for quite some time. My heart seized in my chest as I reached for the innocuous-looking folder with numb fingers. This was it. The moment of truth I'd been simultaneously craving and dreading. Flipping it open, I found myself confronted with a damning dossier of Lauren's misdeeds. Covertly snapped photos of her draped over different men, clad in slinky cocktail dresses and dripping in diamonds. Receipts for hotel rooms and rideshares to upscale bars, always while she was supposedly at work conferences or yoga retreats. Screenshots of cryptic texts arranging meetups and negotiating fees. Bank statements showing large cash deposits into an account I didn't recognize. On and on the sordid evidence went, each new page a fresh knife to my hemorrhaging heart. It appears your wife has been working as a high-end escort for at least the last 3 years, Weston said quietly as I absorbed the gut-wrenching revelations with rising nausea. From what we can tell, she's got a pretty regular roster of wealthy clients she sees on a weekly basis, in addition to one-off dates at society events. I'm so sorry, Ethan. I barely heard his gruff attempt at comfort over the roaring in my ears. 3 years. 3 years of duplicity, of furtive rendezvous and illicit earnings, all while playing the devoted wife and mother at home. How could I not have seen it? What else had I missed while blithely trusting the woman I'd vowed to spend forever with? I'd thought learning the truth would give me some sense of clarity, of purpose. But now, confronted with the incontrovertible proof of Lauren's betrayal, I just felt hollowed out. Eviscerated. Like shed carved out my heart and left a gaping, oozing chasm in its place. There's more, Weston's voice intruded on my spiraling anguish. He looked pained, as if he'd rather chew glass than voice his next words. The timeline also suggests that, well, that there's a possibility your daughter may not be. Don't, I choked out, cutting him off with a sharp jerk of my hand. I couldn't hear him say it, couldn't bear to have my worst fears confirmed so bluntly. If Lily wasn't mine, if the little girl I loved more than my own life had been born of Lauren's deceit, it would utterly destroy me. Weston subsided with a somber nod, understanding flickering in his flinty eyes. He leaned back in his chair, studying me with something uncomfortably close to pity. What do you want to do? He asked simply. We've got enough to nail her, if that's the route you want to take. Your pal Jack is willing to sign an affidavit about what he saw, and everything we've uncovered more than corroborates his story. Just say the word. I stared sightlessly down at the incriminating photos strewn across the desk, my wife's face mocking me from the glossy confines. I thought of Lily, of her gap-toothed grin and bouncing pigtails. Of lazy Saturday mornings snuggled together in our PJs, a tangle of warm limbs and giggles. Lily, who deserved so much better than this. Slowly, I closed the folder on Lauren's betrayal, fingers steady despite the tempest raging inside me. When I raised my eyes to Weston's expectant gaze, they were hard as flint. I want a paternity test, I bit out, voice tight but resolute. Before I make any decisions, I need to know for sure if Lily is mine. Once I have that answer, then Lauren can face the consequences of her actions. With a decisive nod, I pushed to my feet, tucking the folder full of ugly truths under my arm. Weston rose to shake my hand, his calloused grip firm and oddly reassuring. You got it, he agreed without hesitation. I'll set it up and let you know as soon as we get the results. You hang in there, Ethan. Focus on your daughter, and let me handle the rest. We'll get you through this. Out on the sidewalk, I tilted my face to the watery spring sunshine, eyes closed against the evidence of my wife's perfidy burning a hole through the manila folder pressed to my side. In the space of a week, my entire existence had crumbled to ash, a 21st-century Pompeii lying in the ruins of Lauren's duplicity. But one thing, one person, remained untainted by her choices. My sweet Lily, the axis on which my world spun. Whatever the paternity test revealed, whatever the future held, I had to hold it together for her. Had to build something new from the wreckage, a life where she felt safe and cherished, no matter what. Squaring my shoulders, I turned my feet towards home, towards the little girl waiting for her daddy to make everything all right again. Failure wasn't an option. Not when it came to Lily. For her, I would find a way to weather this storm, to carve a path out of the wasteland Lauren had left behind. The next few days passed in a surreal fog as I waited for the results of the paternity test with bated breath. I felt like a ghost haunting the halls of my own home, going through the motions of work and fatherhood while my insides churned with nauseating uncertainty. Lauren, for her part, remained wholly oblivious to my inner turmoil. She breezed through our interactions with maddening cheer, peppering me with questions about my day and nattering on about her own as if our lives weren't balanced on a knife's edge. I couldn't decide if her guileless act was a mark of sociopathy or a defense mechanism. Either way, every flash of her dimpled grin left me feeling increasingly untethered, my grip on sanity slipping with each innocent inquiry. Late one night, after Lauren and Lily were both snug in their beds, I found myself standing in the pink-swathed nursery, staring down at my sleeping daughter like she held the answers to the universe. In the buttery glow of the nightlight, Lily's cherubic face was relaxed and trusting, one tiny fist pressed against her plump cheek. The moment stretched, gossamer thin, as I watched the steady rise and fall of her little chest, marveling at the perfection ID helped create. Because Lily was perfect, in every way. From the dark lashes that threw spiky shadows on her round cheeks, to the honey gold curls that rioted around her head like a halo. ID spent countless hours of her young life just drinking her in, trying to pinpoint which parts of her were Lauren, and which were indelibly, irrevocably mine. The delicate point of her chin, the bow of her rosebud lips, the startling blue of her eyes, were they imported wholesale from my own genetic code, or mutations that were utterly, uniquely her? Now, I found myself cataloging her features anew, searching for any hint, any omen of what Weston would soon reveal. Would those drowsy blue eyes still spark that same bone-deep connection if they turned out to be an echo of another man's? Would the sweet quirk of her Cupid's bow still melt me into a puddle if Lauren's betrayal ran deeper than I ever imagined? I didn't know. And that not knowing clawed at me like a wild thing, raking furrows into my heart with every passing second. Lily shifted in her sleep, letting out a soft sigh, and my own breath caught painfully in my chest. How could I possibly look at this perfect little person and feel anything but love? Biology be damned, Lily was mine in every way that mattered. I refused to let Lauren's choices poison that unshakable truth. Brushing a whisper-soft kiss over Lily's downy head, I crept out of the nursery and shut the door with a quiet snick. Whatever the results revealed, I would be Lily's father in every sense of the word for as long as she'd have me. Even if Lauren's deception had painted my entire life in shades of fallacy, that commitment would remain my North Star. My guiding light out of the abyss. 2 days later, I found myself back in Weston's cramped office, a plain white envelope lying between us like an unexploded ordnance. I stared at it, pulse thundering in my ears, suddenly terrified to learn the truth I'd been so desperate for. Weston, bless him, seemed to sense my rising panic. Without a word, he reached out and flipped the envelope over, one blunt finger tapping the unassuming rectangle of paper. "No matter what it says," he said gruffly, "that little girl lucky to have you as her daddy. This doesn't change that." Jaw clenched against the swell of emotion his words evoked, I gave a jerky nod and snatched up the envelope before I could lose my nerve. The rip of the seal was deafening in the charged silence, the rasp of the single sheet of paper against my fingertips almost unbearably loud. Unfolding it with shaking hands, I scanned the page until I found the information I sought, 2 innocuous little words that would redefine my entire existence. 99.9% probability of paternity. The breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding whooshed out of me in a great, shuddering gust, my knees turning to water with dizzying relief. Positive. Lily was mine, irrefutably and irreversibly. Whatever else Lauren had done, however far her betrayals ran, she hadn't taken that from me. Tears pricked hot at the backs of my eyes, gratitude and fierce, possessive love surging through my veins like a drug. My daughter. My blood. My heart, now and forever. No one could ever take that away. I looked up to find Weston watching me, a rare, crooked smile softening the hard angles of his face. "Congratulations, Dad," he said simply, understanding thrumming beneath the words. In that moment, I felt a rush of absurd affection for this grizzled man who'd guided me through the darkest chapter of my life with unflappable steadiness. "Thank you," I managed, voice hoarse and wavering with the force of my emotions. "For everything. I couldn't have gotten through this without you." Weston waved away my gratitude with a dismissive grunt, but I caught the pleased glint in his eye before he could shutter it. "Just doing my job," he demurred. Then, more seriously, "But now that we've got confirmation of paternity, we need to talk about next steps regarding your wife." And just like that, reality crashed back down around me, the fizzy elation of moments before souring in my stomach. Lauren. Even with the ironclad proof of her betrayals damning her from Weston's files, the thought of actually confronting her, of tearing our lives apart and laying waste to the future we'd built, made me want to hurl. How was I supposed to look into those guileless green eyes and inform the mother of my child that I knew every dirty secret she'd been so careful to bury? Weston, astute as ever, zeroed in on my renewed tension like a shark scenting blood. "Ethan," he said firmly, leaning forward to pin me with that piercing gaze. "I know you're scared. I know you're imagining 1,000 worst-case scenarios. But you can't let fear rule you now. You have the upper hand here. You have proof, and the moral high ground. It's time to take back control." I swallowed hard, fingers clenching white-knuckled around the irrefutable proof of my paternity. He was right. For 3 years, Lauren had been the master puppeteer, every choice stage managed for maximum duplicity. But now, armed with the truth, with Lily's rightful place as my daughter secure, I could finally cut those damning strings. I could dismantle the web of deceptions she'd spun around us and build something new, something honest, from the ashes. My eyes hardened, resolve crystallizing in my chest like a shard of ice. No more would I dance to Lauren's twisted tune. No more would I languish in the purgatory of wondering. It was time to take back my life, my agency. For Lily. For me. For the future we deserved. Weston, watching the change come over me, nodded once in soundless approval. There he is, he murmured. There's the man ready to fight for his little girl. So, Ethan. What's the plan? I met his gaze, my own infused with newfound steel. I had a lot of work to do, a labyrinthine trail to excavate out of Lauren's wilderness of secrecy and lies. But first things first. You've got connections in family law, yeah? I asked, voice steady despite the magma churning in my gut. Weston nodded. Good. Because I need the best divorce attorney in the city. It's time to purge the poison and finally cauterize this wound. Weston's eyes gleamed, something like pride warming their flinty depths. Copy that, he agreed. Give me 24 hours, and he'll have a pit bull in a suit ready to raise hell and take names. He stuck out a hand, scarred and blunt. Go home. Kiss your daughter. And get ready to take your life back. I clasped his hand, his words igniting like a clarion call in my bones. Enough wallowing in the wreckage of Lauren's betrayal. It was time to rise, to rebuild. To craft a life where Lily could thrive untainted by her mother's sins. Armed with the irrefutable proof of Lily's paternity and a renewed sense of purpose, I threw myself into preparing for the battle ahead. Weston was as good as his word, connecting me with a shark of a divorce attorney named Vanessa who took one look at the evidence he'd compiled and smiled like a cat had been handed the world's juiciest canary. Mr. Summers, she purred, red lacquered nails tapping against the incriminating photos of Lauren scattered across her desk. With this kind of ammunition, we won't just secure you primary custody of your daughter. We'll make sure your soon-to-be ex-wife doesn't see a penny of your hard-earned assets. By the time we're done with her, she'll be lucky to afford a studio apartment, let alone maintain her extravagant lifestyle. I felt a momentary pang at the gleeful malice in Vanessa's voice, a tug of lingering loyalty to the woman I'd once pledged my life to. But then I remembered the years of lies, the unmistakable proof that Lauren had been selling her body and our vows to the highest bidder while I'd been home changing diapers and cutting crusts off sandwiches. The way she'd let me believe in our family, in our forever, all while betraying us in the most heinous way imaginable. Any qualms I had about playing hardball evaporated like mist under the scorching heat of my righteous fury. Lauren had torched our life together with her duplicity. It was time she felt the burn. With Vanessa's help, I began methodically dismantling the artifice Lauren had so carefully constructed, brick by crumbling brick. We pored over bank statements and phone records, compiling an airtight case of my wife's nefarious activities. I signed Lily and I up for counseling, determined to give my daughter the emotional support she'd need to weather the impending upheaval. And, after much debate and a few too many sleepless nights, I decided the only way to truly lance the festering boil of Lauren's betrayal was to spring it on her in spectacular fashion. Vanessa, with a slightly manic gleam in her eye, helped me concoct a plan so diabolically perfect, it bordered on Shakespearean. We would arrange one last job for Lauren, a lucrative private event at a swanky hotel on the outskirts of town. Only this time, instead of a lascivious millionaire, it would be me waiting in that room, divorce papers in hand and vengeance in my heart. The night of the grand reveal, I paced the tastefully appointed hotel suite like a caged tiger, every nerve in my body thrumming with adrenaline and tightly leashed rage. Vanessa had assured me Lauren would arrive promptly at 8, thinking she was meeting a wealthy new client with a penchant for discretion. The minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness, each second-hand stroke ratcheting the tension in my frame a notch higher. At precisely 8:02, a soft knock sounded on the door, and my heart lurched into my throat. This was it. The moment of truth. With fingers that trembled imperceptibly, I reached out and yanked open the door, steeling myself for the inevitable confrontation. Lauren stood frozen on the threshold, eyes widening in shock as she took in my imposing form. For a beat, we simply stared at each other, the weight of 3 years' worth of lies and betrayal hanging thick in the air between us. "Hello, Lauren," I said finally, my voice cool and implacable. "Or should I call you by your work name? I must admit, I'm not certain of the protocol here." Lauren opened her mouth, then closed it again, her expression cycling through a dizzying array of emotions too quick to parse. Shock, fear, confusion, and finally, a glimmer of sickening understanding. "Ethan," she breathed, complexion going ashen beneath her expertly applied makeup. What are you doing here? I don't understand." "Don't you?" I asked, cocking my head and taking a slow, deliberate step forward. Lauren flinched back instinctively, and I felt a thrill of vicious satisfaction. I think you understand perfectly well, sweetheart. You see, I know everything. Every sordid, disgusting detail of the double life you've been living for the past 3 years. Lauren shook her head frantically, a hint of wild desperation entering her eyes. No, she whispered, no, you don't, it's not what you think, I can explain. Explain. I cut her off with a bark of humorless laughter. What is there to explain, Lauren? How you've been selling yourself to the highest bidder while I've been home playing the fool. How you've lied and schemed and betrayed your family in the most despicable way imaginable. Please, enlighten me. Tears had begun to stream down Lauren's face, tracking through her artfully applied blush and mascara. She looked like a tragic heroine in a watercolor painting, all smudged lines and bleeding colors. I waited for the inevitable tug of sympathy, of sorrow at her obvious distress. But all I felt was a yawning chasm of emptiness where my love for her used to reside. Ethan, please, she choked out, reaching for me with trembling hands. It was a mistake, the biggest mistake of my life. I never meant to hurt you, or Lily. I swear it. You have to believe me. I looked at her, at the woman I'd once thought hung the moon and stars, and felt nothing. No anger, no bitterness, no yearning for what we'd lost. Just a bone-deep weariness, and a simmering determination to protect the one untainted thing she'd left me, our daughter. It doesn't matter, I said softly, taking a step back from her grasping fingers. Whatever your reasons, whatever mistakes you think you made, the fact remains, you sold out our family, our future, for a few dirty dollars and a taste of the high life. And I won't let Lily grow up thinking that's acceptable. I won't let your poison touch her for a second longer than it already has. Lauren's face crumpled, a wretched sob tearing from her throat. What are you saying? She asked, voice small and lost. I had to turn away, fixing my gaze on the inoffensive hotel art above the bed. If I looked at her for a second longer, I'd lose my resolve. I'm saying it's over, Lauren, I replied, proud of the way my voice remained steady. I've already filed for divorce. Full custody of Lily. You'll be served with the papers tomorrow, but I wanted you to hear it from me first. I wanted to look you in the eye when I told you that your deceit, your selfishness, cost you everything. I hope it was worth it. On the last word, my composure fractured, the bitterness and betrayal I'd been choking down for weeks finally splintering through. I spun on my heel, needing to be anywhere but in that suffocating room, with the noxious odor of Lauren's used-up love. I strode to the door, ignoring the broken sounds of her weeping, the pleas for absolution and understanding I knew I'd never grant. My hand was on the knob, freedom and fresh air just beyond, when Lauren's voice stopped me cold. Ethan, wait, she called, something new, something shattering, threading through the words. I turned to look at her, one final concession to the woman I'd once pledged forever to. Lauren stared back at me, tears still coursing down her ruined face. But there was a resignation there now, an acceptance of the fate she'd written for herself with every lie, every furtive encounter. I love you, she whispered, the words an epitaph for all we'd lost. I always have, and I always will. I only hope that someday, you can find a way to forgive me. For Lily's sake, if not for mine. For a moment, I let myself remember the girl I'd fallen for all those years ago. The shy smile, the infectious laugh, the way she'd looked at me like I was her whole world. The way I'd felt like the luckiest man alive, every single day. It had been real, once. Before the fame and the money and the secret trysts had rotted it from the inside out. Maybe, in another life, that love would have been enough to overcome any obstacle. Maybe Lauren and I would have grown old together, watching our daughter blossom into a woman as beautiful as her mother, with twice the integrity. But in this life, in this sordid reality Lauren had authored for us, love was just another casualty of her deceit. Another cherished thing she'd sacrificed on the altar of her own gratification. Goodbye, Lauren, I said quietly, and let the door click shut behind me with grim finality. In the hallway, I leaned my forehead against the cool plaster wall and let out a shuddering breath. It was done. The page had been turned, the chapter closed on the smoldering wreckage of my marriage. All that was left now was to sift through the ashes and forge something new from the debris. Something untainted by Lauren's corruption. Something worthy of the little girl currently snuggled in her bed across town, blissfully unaware that her entire world had just tilted on its axis. Pulling out my phone, I dialed Vanessa's number with fingers that had finally stopped shaking. "It's done," I said without preamble when she answered. "If you're still at the office, file those papers. I want to put as much distance between my daughter and this mess as humanly possible." "You got it, Chief," Vanessa replied, something like approval warming her normally brusque tone. "And Ethan? For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. I know it couldn't have been easy. But Lily's lucky to have a father like you fighting for her." Throat suddenly tight, I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Thanks, Vanessa," I managed. "For everything. I couldn't have done this without you." "Anytime," she said, smile evident in her voice. "Now what do you say we nail your lying louse of an ex-wife to the wall and get you that happily ever after you deserve?" For the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt my lips curve into a smile of my own. "I say let's bring the rain."